that. You can hear it. It's light. It's weak. This is Crowkeeper Studios in Sacramento, California, and I thought I would make a short video, or at least I hope it's going to be short, about a topic that's been bothering me for a long time, and it's something that a lot of people do talk about, but it's the misdiagnosing of why metal sounds so samey these days, regardless of genre. There's two aspects to this, and the biggest one is actually economics, and the second one is insecurity. Now, this video, I'm going to talk mostly about insecurity, and I can point out some things that'll probably be pretty obvious, or at least I hope so. So, the first thing is that I talk to a lot of musicians. I've recorded thousands of people, and if I ask any of these people, kind of just take a survey, what kind of albums inspire you? What kind of albums do you want to make? They're almost always going to say, and this is in bands that commit the crimes that I'm going to talk about later. You know, they will say something along the lines of, well, I want to make some record whose release date probably lands somewhere between 1985 and 2008 or 9. The bleeding edge is 2010 and 11. But even then, it drops off a fucking cliff. Nobody wants to really be working on or releasing records, or they're not inspired by records on a broad level by records that are in 2016, 17, or forward. Anything that's newer than that. Now, I know the idiots will say something along the lines of, well, that's bullshit because I love X, Y, and Z record and they came out in, whatever time. Yeah, but if we ask you the bulk of your records that you like and the bulk of the records that you want to release, like records that you wish you could have something like that to release, the records that you're talking about, these newest ones, they're going to make up a tiny fraction of the overall records. Most of the time, if I ask somebody to give me a top 5, I don't even think I'll see a single record. So it's almost certainly sub 20%. They're almost never being mentioned in my presence, and I see this on the regular. This is the case. Now, here's the problem. Bands will say that, and then they'll do exactly the opposite of the things that it took to make the records that they kind of aspire to release. These records, obviously, they stood the test of time. They're mixed excellently. They sound great. They have good songs. And the mixes and just the general aesthetic of the entire recording is working with the songs that are present. And this is something that doesn't really exist anymore. On all of the records that I'm going to kind of play, just little clips, on these songs, we're going to be hearing what I think many engineers these days, due to insecurity, they're going to say, this is a flaw in the recording. This is a problem. This is something that should be solved. And, it gets solved, but at a cost. And, when it comes to the cost, well, now we're negatively affecting the songs and the way that we're presenting the songs. These songs are not getting better. They're getting worse by doing the tactics that we're doing. And these are always insecurity. And so let me give you some examples. Let's press play on some of these songs. And the first thing I want you to notice is the clarity of the kick and the clarity of the snares in all of these tracks. Because snare drums tend to sound the same lately, and many people will just, use something that sounds like a fucking cannon, and, it's always at max velocity. These are one-shot samples, and, they're squished to death, and, they're so loud that you cannot miss them at any point in time. And then the same thing goes with the kick drum. It's very loud, very obvious at all times. The click is very loud and clear. The low end, usually the lowest of the low end is shelved off quite a bit so that it remains punchy, and it can be heard on like even little baby speakers and stuff, like a phone. But on the old recordings that these people generally, musicians will say, well, I want to make records that sound like this. This is how they actually sound. So let's press play. And you'll probably know some of these bands. Most of these are huge records. And again, these are kind of common records that come up that people say, I want to make a record that sounds like this kind of aesthetic. Okay, so let me move a little bit forward and let's pay attention to the kick and the snare. When we're listening to the kick and the snare on this track, you're going to notice that the kick and the snare, especially the snare, it can get a little bit lost. It obviously does not have any kind of canon-esque sound. It doesn't sound like that at all. It's got a kind of higher pitch sound, and it sounds crisp and awesome, but it doesn't sound anything like the snares that you will almost hear on everything now. The kick drum almost sounds a smidge pillowy, and it was probably so that it doesn't stand in the way of something else in the mix. Now, does it matter? No, it sounds fucking awesome. As a whole, it sounds awesome, but I already know that if somebody were mixing this today, that snare drum needs to be maxed all the time, There's certain times where the kick and the snare are laying on top of each other, and the snare needs to be maxed. And that kick, we're going to multi-band compress the clarity, the kick, the click of the kick to bring it up and make sure that it's maxed. I mean, to whatever degree there was a natural drum on this recording, it would be essentially eliminated. But overall, I think the record sounds great. Now, next song. Now, we're already noticing these guitars sound very different than the previous song. Just completely different. Completely different kick sound. It sounds nothing like that. Again, though, it is kind of on the pillowy, like the pillowy side. It doesn't have very much high end. The high end isn't piercing through everything. And, nonetheless, it sounds great. But we can hear that. It just sounds, by today's, standards or trends, rather, it's not cutting through the mix. The And the funny part is that a record like this, a drummer will say like, I love that. I love the way these drums sound. But in practice, a drummer may or may not actually do that. And the reason why isn't because it's not sounding good if we were to mix the drums to sound just like this. It's that insecurity will come in, and it stops them from getting some sound that's unique in today's market. They'll say, oh yeah, but I can't hear my snare drum or my kick drum or whatever 100% of the time. There's a problem. I don't want to get criticized by anybody. So in that case, I need you to, mix it flatter. I need you to replace, I don't care what you got to do. Replace it with a sample, replace it with, triggers, whatever the case might be. This is what we need in order to be competitive, to do a modern mix, some bullshit like that. So let's keep playing. More to do with this, it hurts. I mean, to me, it sounds fucking awesome. And obviously, it does sound awesome. The record sold absolutely well. The band was, really at their peak during this record, and it gets played all the time. The songs off this record get played all the time. It's a job well done from a mixing perspective, But like I said, the insecurity will be that the drummer or a band or potentially even a label, may even say like, well, this is the kind of aesthetic we're going for, and then backpedal away from that kind of aesthetic because of things like that. Or because, you get some idiot, on Instagram, Facebook, everybody thinks that they're a recording engineer and they're going to say, that snare doesn't sound fat enough. It's getting lost in the mix. Some bullshit like that. Yeah, okay, so are every single other record that is like a goated record. They all have these problems. That's the way it's going to be. So, again, these are not problems. These are compromises generally. And two, we're talking about a real drum kit. And real drum kits have, for most engineers and for this time period, there's only so much you could do to brighten up that kick or snare or make it cut through. But nonetheless, this is a real drum kit, and it's not going to sound 100% consistent because, well, that's not the way the drummer was playing. The drummer doesn't, if he doesn't have the heaviest beaters and then he's stomping on the drum, then you're not going to get that kind of sound all the time. That's just physics. That's the way it works. So next record. Again, very different guitar tones. And just very different aesthetic in total. The kick drum is a little clickier, not too much more, a little clickier. The guitars are still they're still stealing the show. The bass doesn't have quite as much character. But, again, the snare and the kick drum are not nearly as aggressive as you would hear these days. And, well, they're not as flat. That's really what it is. They're not nearly as flattened out, and devoid of all soul as what you hear nowadays. we can hear, there's certain times where I feel like I can hear the snare drum all the time, but it's not in your face. Absolutely not. It's not. This would be considered weak by, a sample's standards. And yet, this sounds amazing. And yet, this song has probably been played 100 times more, often than some of these other songs that a person will actually try to mix to. And this insecurity goes up to the engineers too, because, they, even if they walk into the whole recording sphere, thinking like, oh, I'm going to stand up to I'm going to give bands something unique. I'm going to make each and every band sound unique. That's not what's going to actually happen for most people, because insecurity is going to take over. They're going to feel like, well, I'm not going to get the next job if I release a mix that sounds exactly like this mix right here. Exactly like it. Because someone is, this is how they'll think. Somebody is going to say, well, this isn't good enough. This isn't strong enough. The snares, the kicks, they're getting lost in the mix at some point on some device. And, it's not acceptable. So what do? Flatten it out. You use samples. You make it devoid of any character. And when you do that to every single band, you make every single band sound the same. This is non-negotiable. Yeah, you can hear during this part that the snare is kind of lost. I mean, it's there. You can hear it a little bit, but it's not punching through that double bass part, because they're landing on top of each other. And same with those toms. That tom is, he's doing a tom fill right there, and you're not hearing that well. Does it matter? No, sounds fucking awesome to me. And, its play count already tells you everything. That's the legitimacy right there. That's its credibility. That's, it tells the whole story. So let's move on. Now, again, too, I'm not saying that all of these songs don't have any, potential augmenting or anything like that. But the aesthetic was to make it sound natural. So if there are any samples or triggers in there, they're mixed to a very small degree, just enough to get a little extra clarity out of there. They're not mixed now where you're just using 100% samples and triggers, and everything sounds, at 127 velocity, and it's just, it's fake as fuck. So, next record. Classic. Fucking A. It sounds so good. But again, the kick is not super clicky. The snare is not a cannon. There will be, throughout this entire thing, drums getting somewhat lost in the sauce. And it doesn't matter. The star of the show is the guitars. We're focusing on the guitars, and it sounds good. And there's dynamics there. These, like, the overall master is not squished to the same degree that you will get masters now, which are just completely thrashed. I mean, people thought these records were loud, and then they made them that much louder, thinking like, oh, that sounds better. But we sell less fucking records than ever. So, we're selling less records, less people by percentage are listening to metal, and rock, and then we're, claiming that, we're winning here. No, we're losing. I remember this record being, a couple of these songs on this record being on MTV, beating out the top pop stars at the time. And nowadays, on a play count, we're getting, rock and metal is getting absolutely slaughtered. I mean, it's, words talk, numbers scream, and that's just the way it is.
Corruption and abuse. It's in our nature to kill, kill, kill. Again and again. Corruption and abuse.
The snare is decently loud, but it's it's very short. It's a very short sounding snare, very dry sounding snare. It's not a big sounding snare at all. The kick drum is, again, it's like a pillowy kind of sound. It doesn't have a lot of super low end. It's more punchy, but it doesn't have a lot of clarity. And that's okay. Because it's clear enough. The main thing that we're focusing on is the guitars, and the guitars sound absolutely stellar.
The salesman of our blood for the public's craving existence in the dark.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds killer. Next record. Completely different right out the gate. It's got much more low end. It's like a thicker low end than the previous record. Again, these records sound very different. The guitar tones are very different. The drum tones are very different. Everything is so different about all of these records. And like it or not, that doesn't exist anymore, because the insecurity forces bands to have a sound that converges. So, there's a certain thing. Well, all drums need to be heard. Well, how can we make that happen, most effectively? Use these big cannon-like snare sounds that have tons of low mid kind of sound, and then hit it with a good amount of reverb. And then, we're using these kick drums that are essentially a single hit, and they're just pasted over and over and over, or just triggered, or sampled. And we're going to do similar kinds of techniques in order to get each and every drum to sound like it's cutting, and it makes it flat, it makes it lifeless, it makes it, it loses character, and it causes, other problems that we then have to solve. And those problems, they're not worth it. And they're not doing rock and metal any favors.
Lightning starts for you. I sleep better in the dark. I'm not doing this for you. It's just because of you I don't believe the lightning is the truth. You're mine. I raise it to shine. I raise it to shine. I'm not wasting anymore. I'm not waiting just for you. I sleep better in the dark. I'm not doing this for you. This is because of you I don't believe the lightning is the truth. I release. We're weak, and this is over. You are right, waste your time. Discarded what this dirty.
On some of these hits, you can tell where the drummer is doing, rather than kicking twice with the two different pedals, he's kicking, twice with the same pedal. So, it's got like a lighter, and it feels weaker. It's kind of a, borderline, a little bit lost, I mean, it's there, but it's not as obvious. And I know these are kinds of, these are problems that an engineer will try to solve, And the reason why they'll try to solve that is because they are essentially insecure. They're afraid that their ability to mix is going to get criticized by the band or criticized by people on the outside. And from there, what do? Well, okay, you're criticizing it, and I'm afraid I might not get the next job, and so I'm going to play it safe. So I'm going to just trigger over it. I'm going to make sure that, every single hit was heard to the maximum. An absolute mistake here. But the record to me sounds great. I don't know, again, if there was a little bit of samples or anything used in there, but again, the aesthetic is to not make it sound fake. And, largely it doesn't. It sounds, awesome. And again, these drums are not as, big and crazy as anything you would hear these days. And let me play the previous song, just a little clip of it again, so that we can hear the kind of aesthetic difference between the two.
Blood brothers keep it real to the end. Deeper than I thought you think, not a trend. Corruption and abuse, the salesmen of our blood, for the public scraper.
Very different. Okay, I think I have one or two more, so let's take a listen.
With these things in mind, but all of me can see the words revealed is the only real thing that I've got.
Now, I remember Meteora being a record that, people would say for sure, with 100%, this has top tier nu metal production involved. This is some of the best of the best, and yet we're going to notice some of the same problems, which is the kick and the snare are not super clear, and they're definitely not the kind of bland aesthetic we hear all the time now, which is cannons and these really papery and punchy kick drums that are flattened to the point that you don't miss a single hit.
Left to feel, just stuck, hollow and alone, and the fault is my own, and the fault is my own. I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long. Erase all the pain till it's gone. I wanna heal, I wanna feel like I'm close to something real. I wanna find something I wanted all along. Somewhere I belong.
You can hear throughout the whole thing, there's the snares are getting often mixed. The kick is or lost rather. The kick is getting lost. Sometimes even on an opening hit, that kick gets a little bit weak because there's like this sub low end, coming through. That you can hear it. It's light. It's weak. And these days, some engineer would be like, no, this is a problem. I don't want the potential criticism of the fact that, it wasn't mixed so fucking flat that, the client or the label is bitching about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to flatten the hell out of it now and make sure that, there's nothing that they could say.
Stuck, hollow and alone, and the fault is my own, and the fault is my own. I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never.
Now, when we're in, just a little bit over a bar, we're starting to hear that kick a little bit more. It's punching more, but those initial few hits, they're kind of lost in the sauce.
Fault is my own, and the fault is my own. I wanna heal, I wanna feel what I thought was never real. I wanna let go of the pain I felt so long. Erase all the pain till it's gone. I wanna heal,
again, you know, that's just the way it is. So this is the first video that I was going to make, and I'm not going to make it any longer. But I did want to, you know, just show you guys that these records are very different. They don't sound anything alike. And I'll actually just spend the last minute and I'm just going to skim through each one so that we can hear a quick back to back of how different each one of these is. But this isn't the case anymore. And again, it is insecurity that causes this problem. Because these records sound great. You can hear on After Dinner Payback, the drums are much louder relative to the guitars. It's just a choice that they made, and, you know, still sounds awesome. You know, and was it impossible probably to make each of these at that time super bright or super cutting or whatever? Probably not. It's just that this is not what these top tier engineers chose to do. This was not going to make the record better. And so these are the results that they landed on. And you know, the fact that we are so far away from that. And again, these records all sound different. And that benefits the band. That benefits the records. That benefits everything that they're trying to do to stand out from one another. What are we doing now? We're making records that sound the same. Or at least most of you are. You're making records that sound the same. You're making the same mistakes. You're falling into the same insecurities as the next guy. And so you're releasing a record that sounds the same. And part of it is the band, but part of it is also the engineer, you know, feeling like, well, if I don't do things this way, then is there another job coming? That's just the way it is. So this is part one, talking about the insecurity. And the next video of this sort, I will talk about the economics, which is actually one of the bigger ones. It is probably the primary reason. So thanks for watching. I hope that this video doesn't get taken down because I played so many songs. So we will just see. Until next time.